August.
Okay, she's ready.
Cool,
for you.
thank you. Nice. Oh.
It's full.
About New Jersey. Yeah, there's a guy that's selling $45.
Welcome aboard. We're glad you joined us today.
Welcome aboard.
Please keep your arms and legs inside the car. Remain seated at all times and do not exit the train until it has come to a complete stop. Smoking is not allowed on the train or anywhere at the Springs Preserve. This tour will last approximately 20 minutes and will give you a view of early Las Vegas. Let's start our journey through history.
History, you say? Absolutely. Las Vegas's history didn't just begin when we became a city in 1905. You'll have to go back much further, 10,000 years in fact, to discover our roots. But we're going to make those discoveries easier today. That's because right this second, you're riding through where it all began. Here, just minutes away from the concrete and bright lights of one of the world's most well-known cities, lies a spectacular cultural and historical treasure, the Las Vegas Springs Preserve. Did you see the water well derrick out your window as our train departed the station? It's symbolic of the reason this land has a rich history. Water. Water is the lifeblood of the desert, and abundant water once flowed here. For more than 10,000 years, water from right here at the Springs Preserve, including the historic Las Vegas Springs and Las Vegas Creek, sustained meadows, mesquite thickets, cottonwoods, and willows that harbored a diverse array of wildlife. This same water helped our city become what it is today. Can you still spot some of the tall cottonwoods? Look for our tallest trees as we travel along. Many of these cottonwoods were first introduced here around the 1850s, and some are 100 years old or more. Imagine this place as an eco-island, a patch of green among the browns and reds of the desert. Waters deep below the ground sustain the cottonwoods and life along the creek, cooling and nourishing the people and animals who stopped at its banks. Those spring waters stopped flowing to the surface in the 1960s, parching much of the landscape. But today, you'll see that landscape changing for the better.
You're traveling in comfort through about 110 acres of the preserve's 180-acre site. Things are a bit wild here. The sidewalks and malls outside outdoors, and that natural look is just the way we like it. You see, we're restoring this land to how it appeared before our valley was so developed. Wildlife thrives in this environment. In fact, more than 250 species of animals call the preserve home. Reptiles and mammals live here year-round, and each year, some 150 species of migratory birds pass through. During our tour, you may spot a lizard, a ground squirrel, or even a member of our resident fox family. Keep in mind that many desert animals lie low or even underground during daytime hours in warmer months. Today, you're traveling on our Exploration Loop Trail, the longest of our 4 trails. Do you hear a faint hum of traffic nearby? That's because a portion of this trail borders what is now Highway 95, or US 95 to the locals. While 95 is our neighbor, it isn't a nuisance, since a protective eco-friendly sound wall shelters the preserve's natural areas and habitats. In the 1970s, these areas were almost lost to development. Planners wanted to widen the old highway right through this property, and that led to plenty of debate about the future of these 180 acres. Citizens in the Las Vegas Valley Water District rallied to save this site, rightly calling it the birthplace of Las Vegas. In 1978, the Springs Preserve was named to the National Register of Historic Places. Nearly 30 years later, in 2007, we opened the Springs Preserve to the community and developed it into what you see today.
These 30 years preserved story, which actually begins in prehistoric times, when the Las Vegas Valley was in the middle of a vast sea. Beginning around 200 million years ago, the seas began to recede, and the desert began to form. Over thousands of years, water pushed out from under the ground. As springs bubbled up from the aquifer beneath, the water soaked the soil. Plants began to grow, and, wouldn't you know it, grazing animals weren't far behind. Water brought not only animals, but also people to the springs. Archaeologists have found human artifacts here dating back thousands of years through the more recent 20th century. A dugout house here on our trails is one of these modern-day finds. Artifacts date back to the late 1870s, and we believe John C. Howell lived in the dugout. Howell was co-owner of the Spring Rancho and one of the first African Americans in the Las Vegas Valley. Long before Howell's time, the oldest artifacts from our site date back about 8,000 years and were discovered along this very trail. Can you think what some of these early artifacts might have been? You'd be right if you said arrowheads and hunting tools. The ancestral Cottonwoods were among the earliest hunters here, as the site was a good place to camp and track migrating animals that also came here for the abundant water.
Life was domestic too. Picture pottery shards from early home. We found evidence that these earliest inhabitants, as well as Native Americans who followed, built pit houses right here at the Springs Preserve. In fact, excavations have revealed the remains of an ancestral Puebloan pit house dating back from 670 to 870 AD. You can see the excavations by walking along the Springs Trail. It's not easy to stay cool in the desert, but pit houses were a smart solution against the heat. In fact, John C. Howell may have modeled his 1870s dugout house on this principle.
And the Southern Paiutes were skilled at it. They used many of the desert's natural resources for food and medicines. For example, have you ever noticed the seed pods that grow on local mesquite trees? The Southern Paiutes collected thousands of pounds of these pods each year. They ground the pods into flour, which they stored to make a variety of foods year-round. Water from the springs helped them grow and harvest maize and squash near here too. Their diet also included rabbits, which they hunted year-round, and other larger animals seasonally. Beginning in the 1830s, European explorers began to discover this land already known to Native Americans. The first to make his mark was likely Rafael Rivera, a young scout who was part of an expedition to find a route from present-day New Mexico to California. Rivera actually got separated from his party, wandered off the trail, and discovered the valley in 1830. Probably a bit of a happy accident. Yes, he was reunited with his group.
You wanna come here?
Someone else.
Large basin at a camping ground called Las Vegas, the term which the Spaniards used to signify fertile or marshy plains. Two narrow streams of clear water 4 or 5 feet deep gush suddenly with a quick current from two singularly long. The taste of the water is good, rather too warm to be agreeable. They, however, the springs weren't protected from debris. Stray museum up ahead continues to transport water into homes in the Western Valley. This pump station will become open as waterworks in coming years, with interactive exhibits showing how we assure a steady water supply to our community each day. No doubt you've noticed work happening on the trails today. We have exciting additions planned for the Springs Preserve, funded in part by the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act. Do you remember the importance of the original spring system? We're restoring portions of those historic springs, including vegetation that will support wildlife and help conserve important fish and amphibian species. If you love history, you'll be excited to see a recreated 1910 Las Vegas streetscape and depot, exploring the role that the railroad and its employees played in the early development of the Las Vegas Valley.
Shake this booty. Shake it, shake it. Shake, 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 shake.